Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a game to discuss. I'm recording this immediately following the Alabama-Georgia game. I typically record on Sunday afternoons, but I could not wait. I'm too fired up after the Alabama win over Georgia by a score of 24-21. We're going to talk all about the game. We're going to talk about what I thought was really, really good, some parts that Alabama absolutely needs to work on if they're going to have success throughout the course of this entire season, and then we will get out of here. But like I said, I absolutely had to record this episode as quickly as possible. A couple of housekeeping things to note before we get into the episode. I know I've had a lot of new subscribers, since one of my last episodes. So if you're new here, thank you so much for joining. If you're currently not subscribed, if you could do me a favor and drop a subscribe down below, I absolutely would appreciate it. Additionally, if you hear any ads on Apple or Spotify, that's because I am a part of the Bleed Podcast Network. So anything you could do to help out those sponsors, we really would appreciate. But let's get right into the game. First things first, Alabama wins by a score of 24-21. My girlfriend kind of pointed out a stat that, I was very surprised by. Alabama wins this game without scoring in the second half. Obviously, they missed the field goal, but I think the reason why that surprises me so much is Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, and just their whole staff does a really, really good job of making adjustments. And I thought that Kirby and their staff did a great job of making adjustments. But typically with that, I thought that Georgia was going to come out firing and be able to score enough times that Alabama had to score to win this game. I had previously predicted in my other episode a score of 31-27. At halftime she asked me hey, do you think that prediction's still good? I thought that was going to be a little low. In my mind, it was kind of first one to 35 roughly, maybe even first one to 40. But Alabama's defense kind of went full bend but don't break, and they only give up the one touchdown in the second half, and then, bent quite a lot. Georgia got a ton of running yards, but when it came down to crucial crunch time, Alabama is able to get off the field on defense, get the ball back to your offense, and Ty Simpson and Jam Miller and the offense is able to run out the game. So let's kind of talk about a couple of key players. First and foremost, you have to talk about Ty Simpson. He goes 24 of 38 with 2 TDs. He has 280 yards passing. Ty Simpson was absolutely phenomenal. 276 yards passing. And then additionally has another 12 yards running in the touchdown. I thought that Ty Simpson was very, very good with the football today. I think that, an underrated part of a game when you see something like this is the fact that not only did he not throw any interceptions, there was only one ball all day that really felt like it possibly should have been intercepted. That was the ball early on that went to KJ Bolden that ends up being dropped by the defense. But other than that, it really felt like Ty Simpson was in complete control of the offense. He was not making stupid plays. He was not making stupid penalties. He was doing exactly what you need to do with the football. Additionally, past that, I would also say the fact that Ty Simpson stayed above the sticks. Everything he did, it felt like he was in control of that offense. The one knock, if you had to give him a knock, is I think early on in this game, he was taking too long to get his protection set up and to get any play adjustments set up. That's why you saw him use 3 timeouts in the first 2 drives. Obviously, you don't love to see that. I thought in the second half, he was substantially better at that. At the end of the first half, he was substantially better at that. But that's something you're going to want to, see a little bit better on the road in the future. Obviously, at home, you're not as concerned. The crowd's not going to be as much into it. But on the road, that is going to be a little bit of a concern moving forward, and is something you're going to need to make sure you kind of work on to make sure that you're not having any issues getting the play in and having to burn a bunch of timeouts. But overall, I thought that Ty Simpson was very, very good with the football and was a huge highlight in this game. The other guys on the offense that I think you have to mention, I think first and foremost, you have to mention the offensive line. I think the fact that they don't give up any sacks to Ty Simpson and they just did a very, very good job of protecting Ty all day, giving him time to throw, picking up blocks. I thought that all day they did a very, very good job. If you're going to single out one guy on that line, you have to talk about Caden Proctor, because Ryan Grubb is an absolute madman. And after, motioning him out in a few different screen plays to have him as a lead blocker, we end up getting Caden Proctor out on the perimeter and throw him the football. And, now you get the pretty famous, which I'm sure will be everywhere, famous photo of Caden Proctor with the football in his hands running downhill at some defensive backs that now have to make a business decision of, am I tackling 360 pounds coming dead at me? Obviously, he doesn't get the touchdown. He sets up the very easy Ty Simpson touchdown, but huge deal in the fact that Caden Proctor, they trust him enough to catch that ball. You trust him enough to be kind of unique with the play calls. I thought that Ryan Grubb all day did a very, very good job of keeping the defense questioning what was going to happen. Whether it be the Caden Proctor pass, whether it been the fact that Jeremy Bernard had a completion in this game, whether it be, I think you really spread the ball around when you're talking about receiving. You had 9 different guys, I think, or 8 different guys catch the football. Obviously, you used the running backs out of the backfield. You used your tight ends. You used your receivers. You used Caden Proctor, right? All these different guys caught the football, even down to the final play. You have a misdirection, and Georgia and everyone thinks the ball is going one way, and all of a sudden you slip the running back out the backside to get the easy completion for Ty to Jam Miller to be able to get down and kind of ice the game. I thought that Ryan Grubb all day was calling an absolute perfection. I thought that there were a couple of moments, if you were going to question anything about his play calls, there were a couple of moments where it felt like he was trying to run the football, and that the reason I was upset, normally I would be very happy you're trying to establish the run, trying to keep the football, keep the defense guessing. The only reason I think I was upset with that is the defense, we were just not having any success running the football. That's a glass half full, glass half empty type situation. You could question, hey, they weren't being very successful, so were they worth anything? But then Jam Miller gets 7-yard runs in the final drive to help ice the game, so maybe those runs put some extra fatigue on people. Personally, I think I would have liked to see Ty Simpson with the ball in his hand a little more instead of those runs, because I thought that Ty was making such good decisions. I thought your speed outs, your quick screens, stuff like that, as an offshoot of the running game, was working better than the actual handoff to the running backs for stretches of this game. At times, obviously, you were able to have some pretty successful runs, but, your longest runs all day were an 11-yard run by Jeremy Bernard, a 10-yard run by Ty Simpson, and then technically Caden Proctor's counted as a run because it was behind the line of scrimmage, an 11-yard run by Caden Proctor. So those were kind of your only long runs of the day. You didn't really have super long runs. You weren't able to gash people in the running game. Jam Miller had the 7-yard runs that helped set up the end of the games, right? You were able to run when you needed to, but Georgia had substantially more success running the football. They had 5 guys with runs of over 10 yards and 2 guys with runs of over 40 yards. They did a much better job running the football than Alabama did. And it showed, right? Alabama, when we start talking about the things that Alabama has to work on, that's a huge piece. Before we get into that, one other guy that I absolutely need to talk about on the offensive side of the field from a positive perspective is Jeremy Bernard. We've talked about him at length on this show about how good he's been catching the football, how he is your wide receiver one. Ryan Williams gets all the star praise and all the excitement because he was the 17-year-old freshman last year. Georgia was his breakout game. For good reason, right? Ryan Williams is kind of the superstar, so to speak. Jeremy Bernard is just Mr. Consistency. Whether it's running the football, he had a pass, whether it's catching the football, Jeremy Bernard just does what it takes to win football games. Absolutely incredible. In this game, he ends up having 5 receptions and a touchdown. He also has 5 rushes for 20 yards. He has the pass, as I mentioned. Jeremy does anything that you need. It's the reason why Kalen trusts him so much. Obviously, their time together at Washington, but Jeremy is by far, in my opinion, one of the most important, outside of like a Parker Brailsford, one of the most important guys on the entire offense. Hugely important. Very, excited to how they were able to use him in this game. One piece that I do want to mention if we're talking about kind of bad and unique things that happen on the offensive side of the football before we move over to the defense. Ryan Williams obviously drops a touchdown pass. That's a major issue. He now has 12 drops since last year. That's I believe that leads the SEC. I saw that stat pop up. That's a problem, right? Ryan's going to have to, obviously be substantially more sure-handed. It was a perfect ball by Ty and really would have blown open the game early. Obviously, Alabama does end up scoring on that drive, but, when you have that shot wide open against a Georgia team that doesn't give you a whole lot of them, you really need to convert on that. I thought that Ryan did better later on in the game, obviously catching the football, not being worried about contact and such, etc. Kirk Herbstreit even talked about Ryan missing a block on a Jeremy screen. Again, it just felt like early in this game, Ryan's head was not in the right place. He got better as the game went on and made some crucial catches down the stretch, ended up with 43 yards receiving, but just was not his best game from a blocking perspective and just overall. I don't think that Ryan Williams was fully in the game quite as much as you need him to be. You really would like to see that change in the future. And then over on the offensive line battle perspective, there was quite a lot that happened in this game. You saw Will Sanders come in the left guard position for stretches of this game. For a huge piece of this game, Wilkin Formby was at right tackle. And then later on at the end of this game, you started seeing Wilkin Formby actually slide into left or to right guard, where you still had Michael Carroll at right guard. I'm not sure what all is happening on the offensive line. You definitely saw a lot of very unique combinations out there today. Would be curious to see what kind of questions are asked about the offensive line. I know that's been a point of question by a lot of the media guys. So would be curious to see what we hear potentially later on this week. I doubt there's going to be any questions. Again, I'm recording this before the press conference, but I doubt there's going to be any questions for DeBoer about that. But would be very curious to hear what we see out of Ryan Grubb or Kalen DeBoer in the midweek press conferences, because I would be very curious. There was a lot of things happening with the offensive line. Then we shift over to the defense. And when we shift over to the defense, I think it was a very strange defensive showing. It was a very much a bend but don't break defense today. Alabama ends up giving up 357 yards. They were very good on third down, only giving up 2 of 8 on third down. They on the 1 fourth down that Georgia ran there at the end of the game, Alabama does stop them. Through the air, Georgia's not super successful. 3 of 20 for 130 yards. Alabama did a good job being where they needed to be from a passing perspective. The one exception, I guess you would say, to that is the deep ball. Or actually, there was 2 deep balls. The one deep ball that Damani Jackson gets burned on. I'm still not 100% sure if a safety was supposed to be back or if Damani just gets totally burnt. Was very upset with his effort after he got burnt. But then you had another deep ball that their freshman ends up dropping that would have been a wide open touchdown. Georgia fans, I'm sure, are going to be sick to their stomach about that one because that would have put them up. That was kind of the one spot in the passing game where it felt like Georgia was not quite clicking on all cylinders. It didn't feel like they had Alabama didn't give them many options and many chances to hit big plays in the passing game. They hit the one touchdown that was a huge one, but again, the freshman dropped the touchdown, and that's going to be one that Georgia is going to want back. I'm sure they already want it back. Then in the running game, Georgia was phenomenal. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They averaged 6.9 yards a rush. They rushed for 227 yards, and Alabama had no answer. The only answer that Alabama had is there were a couple of moments where it felt like Alabama was able to get them a little bit behind the sticks, and then that forced them into passing downs. And it wasn't even really that we were stopping them running the football. It's just that we were forcing them where Georgia was not comfortable running the football. Oddly enough, Georgia was averaging enough on the ground that they probably still could have technically run the football. They just weren't comfortable doing so. That was really the spot where Alabama was having success on the defensive side of the football. The other spot that Alabama was having success on the defense is the fact that our offense kept their defense on the field for so long. Alabama had 11 more minutes time of possession in this one. And early on in this one, Alabama was on the field forever. The first 2 drives, Alabama was on the field 14 plays back-to-back. And it was like 12 and a half minutes to 2 minutes for Georgia. And a part of that, it really felt like we wore down Georgia so much that Georgia on the opposite side was trying to run the football really to just give their team a little bit more of a break, to keep the clock running, and, hey, we need a bit more of a breather. And it was actually working phenomenally well for Georgia. The only stop that we really had when they were running the football was the awesome play that Bray Hubbard had to be able to force a fumble. Alabama does it, end up getting a field goal out of it. Would really like to have seen us convert on that one. I think part of the problem with that one is we were so close to the goal line. I think it was like the 17-yard line, maybe. It was just really close, and I'm curious if we didn't have our whole offense available, and we wanted to be more conservative with the ball because it felt like we just ran it and didn't really try to put the ball in harm's way. Just were happy with the 3 points that we were gifted. Really would have liked to have seen us take a little bit more advantage of that specific drive after we get the fumble by Bray Hubbard, but overall wasn't too upset. The one spot that I think I'm really concerned about long term with this defense is the run, stopping the run, especially with misdirections and such. Georgia had a double reverse that wasn't actually a double reverse, it was just a double reverse fake. And Alabama looked awful. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Alabama was just completely unready for that. Keon Sabb on that play bites on the double, ends up giving up like a 40-yard run. And again, it just felt like Georgia was running the ball at absolute will. You saw it against Florida State, and it scares me going into like a Vanderbilt game, potentially an Auburn game, a game where teams are going to be just ready to run the football over and be able to be committed to run the football over and over and over again. Now, I think that part of that, you have to be able to trust that the quarterback can beat you with passing the ball. And I think that's where Georgia had so much success is we had to trust that Gunnar Stockton still could beat you through the air. And I think that's one situation where if Alabama does not get better running the football, we're going to have to commit so much to stopping the run that a quarterback is going to have some open opportunities to beat us in the passing game. And if they complete those open opportunities, it could be a long day for our defense. So if I had to circle one thing on the defensive side, it's going to be getting off the field on longer third downs. I think that in general, Alabama did a really good job. Obviously, we were 2 of 8 on third down against Georgia. So we got them off field 6 times. But those 2, I believe, were fairly long third downs, so you don't love to see that. And then the last one would be, again, stopping the run. Because Georgia did a very, very good job in the power run game because it didn't really feel like they were doing a ton of misdirection. They had a couple of misdirection runs, but it really felt like they were just running and gashing us for 7 yards every run. Again, they averaged 6.9 a carry, and it felt like that was a huge difference in this game. Okay, so one other spot, obviously there's one other piece of the field, special teams. You got one field goal that was good. You got one field goal that might have been the worst kick I've ever seen. It legitimately was atrocious. I'm not sure what Connor Talty was doing. It was pulled so far left that I don't even know what to say about it. It felt like if you're in college football, the video game, and you're learning how to use the field goal kicking and you just completely shank it. I mean, it was atrociously bad, and it was legitimately one of the worst kicks I've ever seen. Long term, that's going to be something you're going to have to, question. Are you going to be able to put your faith in your kicker on the road? Again, the first kick was great, but it was a 30-yarder. It was a chip shot. Maybe been less than that. It was a very, very short field goal. The fact that you trotted him out there for what wasn't a super long field goal, it was in the 40s, but he shanks it that hard is a problem, right? I'm very curious to see what Kalen DeBoer's thought is long-term at the kicking position. He's done a really good job with kickoffs. I think we didn't really have very many returned in this game. You're able to keep Zachariah Branch from hurting you in the return game. So was very happy in general with the kicking game. But I'm not sure at all what that was from a field goal perspective. It was atrocious. All right, finally, some high-level thoughts. The fact that Alabama gets 25 first downs in this game and starts the game 8 for 8 on third down was absolutely incredible. They were clicking on all cylinders. Ty Simpson knew where he wanted to go with the football. You don't have any turnovers. I thought that it was a very clean game from that perspective. Alabama ends up having less penalties against than committed than Georgia does. That's a major deal for Alabama, actually. I believe, and I would have to ask one of the guys who's done all the stats, one of the reporters, but I believe this is probably going to be the first game that Kalen DeBoer has had in his time in Tuscaloosa that his team had less penalties than the team they played against. That's a huge, huge deal. I would say that the one penalty that is there's two penalties that I think you kind of have to circle. The one that's a major deal is the holding on the goal line. Obviously, you would have not given up a touchdown. You get the ball back if that holding doesn't happen. And then the absolutely ridiculous targeting penalty, which I'm sure will be talked about a lot. Have no idea how it was targeting. I understand that they're like, hey, it's crown of the helmet. It was not forcible contact, right? Like, it's supposed to be forcible contact by the crown of the helmet. He pushed a guy with his head in somebody's shoulder, right? Like, in my mind, there's no way that that should be targeting. I thought that it was a completely crazy penalty. Also, the fact that it was not even ruled by the field judges. You had somebody call down to call targeting on that play. Just blows my mind. I think that was an absolutely insane play call or, targeting call. Very, very curious to hear if there's any more explanation about that one. I just didn't think it was forcible enough. You lose James Smith on that one. So very upset about that one. You're going to miss him for the first half of the Vanderbilt game since it did happen in the third quarter. So pretty upset about that penalty. But I thought in general, Alabama actually did a pretty good job from a penalty perspective. Georgia seemed like the one that had more problems from a penalty standpoint, and that's not something you see super often out of Georgia. And then finally, if you're talking high level, the fact that Alabama, again, and I mentioned it earlier, holds onto the ball for over 35 minutes. Georgia has it under 24. It really felt like long term, this was Alabama just held onto the ball and grinded Georgia down. Does what Georgia does to other people. Because, again, Alabama actually only averaged 3.1 yards a rush. I think Jam Miller was under 3 yards a rush average. Yet in the final couple of rushes, Jam Miller gets a 7-yard rush on first down on back-to-back possessions or back-to-back first downs under 3 minutes to go in the game, and it ices the game. It's the difference maker in this entire game, the fact that he gets 2 7-yard rushes. Obviously, credit to the offensive line. It's not just your running back, but the fact that he gets 2 7-yard rushes, that opens up the game and allows you to be able to win this one. So I think that the fact that Alabama is able to hold on to the ball for as long as they did, how successful they were on the offensive side of the ball, how good Ty Simpson was with the ball in his hand, the decisions that he made. I mean, you cannot be more proud than I am of these guys. An absolutely phenomenal one. This is exactly what you want to see, and really, really proud of this one. So that's all I have to talk about on this one. I hope you guys enjoy it. I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but had to put this episode out immediately following the game. It was an absolutely fantastic one. As I previously mentioned last episode, I am going to have some Missouri guys on to talk about the Alabama-Missouri game that's going to be coming up this week. So I will be recording with them, and I'll drop the episode probably on Thursday or Friday. It'll just depend on how some schedules work out. So hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.